Hello everyone and welcome to the first game we'll be covering from this year's Grenke Chess Classic. It is no longer classical time control, this time it's rapid time control, but not really rapid because it's 45 minutes per player plus 5 seconds increment, so it's something they call slow rapid. And well, it is a fair amount of time. You will see just how fair enough it is. So it's Richard Rapport with the white pieces against Magnus Carlsen. And before we get started, I would just like to show you a very nice photo of Magnus accompanied by his father Henrik. So there we have it. We can enjoy that a little bit, and also as we in this tournament, also world classical champion Ding Liren is playing. Here is a nice photo of Ding accompanied by his mother. Now, that being said and shown, let's check out this very nice game. So, as usual, I always like to mention this when Rapport is playing. He's one of the most exciting players to watch in the world. You know, one of the wizards, and he always plays incredible chess. And it doesn't matter how strong his opponent is, he will always find a way, you know, to cast his spells and maybe make it tricky for his opponent. And I always find it incredible that it's possible to do that on such a level as he's a 27 plus player. But okay, let's check it out. We have pawn to e4 by Richard, pawn to c6. Magnus goes for the Caro-Kann defense, d4, d5, and now pawn to e5. Richard goes for the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann, and bishop to f5. And now knight to f3 and knight to c3 are the top two replies. Pawn to h4, the one that Rapport goes for, is the third most popular and bears the name after the former world chess champion Mikhail Tal. This is the Tal variation of the Caro-Kann. Pawn to h5, stopping further advancement of the h-pawn, and you also want to free up that h7 square for the bishop if needed. But now bishop to d3, so you can just trade bishops, and it is definitely considered best. We have bishop captures, queen captures, and now queen to a5 with check. So what Black did here, Black traded off his light square bishop. He will put his pawns on light squares, and then Magnus's dark square bishop will be free to roam in between those light squares. So pawn to c3. You might think, okay, is this not a good opportunity for us to get a free development with bishop to d2? Not really, because after bishop to d2, queen a6 is already considered to be at least equalizing for Black, because the bishop will be placed weirdly on d2. And if white captures, you get another piece into the game. And if you just go for something like e6, which is the most popular, then just queen captures on d3. You give a check here, and then after this is captured, this is already equal for Black. White has the weird pawn structure and not much to claim here. So okay, after queen to a5 with check, pawn to c3, again considered best, and now pawn to e6, stopping white from any pawn to e6 ideas, because if you can get e6 and f captures, then queen to g6 will be very strong, obviously. Pawn to a4, preparing pawn to b4, and pawn to c5, stopping that. We have d captures on c5, and queen captures on c5. And okay, what do you play here? You might consider b4 right away, but then queen to c7. And while it is possible, there are better moves to be considered here. Yes, such positions do exist. So here, just knight to f3. Also a known move, and here Magnus goes for queen to c7. There are games where knight to e7 was played, here queen to c7, and it is now as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So okay, knight to a3. And this is always an unpleasant choice when you have to decide, do you capture the knight or do you keep the strong bishop? Because if you allow knight to b5, then the knight will just come to d4, and it will be incredibly strong. And also, if you play a pawn to a6 to stop knight to b5, you can also just play knight to c2 to d4, and you have the d4 square forever for your knight. Even if it's traded off for Black's knight on b8, then the other knight takes its place, as there is no c pawn to kick it away from there. So Magnus makes the unpleasant choice and goes for bishop captures on a3. Both of them are perfectly fine choices, and both of them are valued equally by our good friend the engine. Rook captures on a3, and now knight to d7. We have castles by Richard and knight to e7 by Magnus, eyeing that f5 or g6 squares, depending on what Richard plays. Rook to e1, also defending the e5 pawn, and now rook to c8. A nice square for the rook, and now queen back to d1. You could also go for bishop to g5 right away, or consider some a5 ideas. It is considered best to play queen to d1, even though this is a completely new position. In such positions, it is very well known that the queen belongs on d1. So pawn to a6, and now bishop to g5. We have knight to g6 and pawn to a5, grabbing more more space and preventing further advancement of the b pawn. We have castles by Magnus, and now rook to a4 with ideas of rook to d4, but also just nicely controlling the fourth rank. Even if the bishop moves, the f4 square will be guarded. So, but yeah, the idea is first you play rook to d4 and then you start advancing those pawns. And Magnus has to make a decision. Does he capture the e5 pawn? It's only defended two times and it's attacked 3 times, but then he will have to give up the h5 pawn. He decides to against it. He plays rook c to e8, and now after rook to d4, also rook to b4 is very nice, as if you want to move the rook, you have to give up the a5 pawn. By playing rook to b4, you also attack the b7 pawn, but both is fine. So rook to d4 by Richard, and now knight d captures on e5. Magnus could also capture on a5, that's perfectly fine. He plays knight captures on e5, knight captures, and now Richard could capture on h5, but he first pins the knight. Now the knight cannot move, and the threat is just bishop captures on e5 to win Magnus's knight. So Magnus has to play f6, but interestingly, f6 only helps him in this position, as it frees up the f5 square for the black queen. So queen captures on h5, queen to f7, offering a queen trade, and now Richard accepts. Queen captures, knight captures, and now bishop back to h2. And the situation on the clock here is 12, well, almost 13 minutes for Richard and 6.5 minutes for Magnus. But you do have the 5 seconds increment. We have king to h7, pawn to g4, and now knight to d8. We have bishop to d6, going after the weirdly placed rook on f8, rook to g8. You could also play rook to f7, but then you run into rook captures on d5, as now the rook on e8 is undefended. So after bishop to d6, rook to g8, a bit of a passive square, but you have to make do. Rook to b4, going after b7 if the knight ever moves, and that's exactly what Magnus does. He goes knight to c6. We'll trade the b pawn for the a pawn, and then he wants to get the knight into the game, maybe even with some flashy maneuvers like this. So rook captures on b7, knight captures on a5, and rook to d7 now, not allowing the rooks to go after the bishop. So knight to c4 puts pressure on the bishop, and now just b3, hoping for knight to capture bishop, but Magnus has other plans for the knight. Knight to d2 attacks the b3 pawn, but don't rush defending it, as knight to f3 check will pick up the rook on e1. So rook to e2, stopping that, and now knight captures on b3. And if you counter the material now, Magnus is up a pawn, but it's very unlikely that he will be able to defend his a6 pawn. We have bishop to e7. Now Richard is threatening bishop captures on f6, and his bishop is very well placed there. King to h6, sidestepping this threat, and now king to f1. Trying to increase the activity of the white king. Pawn to e5, and now rook to b2. Attacks the knight, knight to a5, and now just rook to b6, going after the a6 pawn. And what do you do here? You could defend with something like rook to a8, but then bishop captures on f6, unfortunately, will be your doom, because then bishop captures, g captures, and rook captures is, well, almost checkmate, but after you play rook to g6, there is g5 with check, and after king to h5, rook to h7 check, now you have to move the king, and then you blunder the full rook. So it was a neat little trick, but Magnus picks it up. He goes knight to c4, attacks the rook, rook captures on a6, and now rook to a8, offering a trade of rooks, which Richard accepts. Rook captures, and now rook captures on d5. And from a position where Magnus was up a pawn, now it is Richard who is up a pawn. We have rook to a2, gaining a lot of activity for his rook, and now bishop to c5. Rook to c2, going after the c3 pawn, and here he sort of allowed a little bit of advantage to Richard, and it's very interesting that Richard here plays sort of a suboptimal move, but it's exactly that throws Magnus off guard, because Magnus was playing an increment here. He was down to 10 seconds on the clock, Richard well over a minute, and the move that was played is rook to d3. Richard just defended the c3 pawn. Rook to d7, on the other hand, was very, very impressive, going for bishop to f8, and now should Magnus continue with just rook captures on c3, then bishop to f8, and already this is looking very, very, very weird for the black king. The problem is, even if had he gone for this rook to d7 idea, there is pawn to e4, which guards the f3 square, prepares it for the knight. And now the same idea of bishop to f8, knight to d2 check, king g2, and knight to f3, isn't all that impressive. Now, for example, bishop captures with check, king to g6, and now let's say rook to c7. If you want to guard your pawn here, now comes knight captures on h4, or even if you don't move the rook, if you play pawn to h5 check, king to g5, and everything is still perfectly fine. But okay, after rook to c2, Richard played rook to d3, and here Magnus probably thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for me. Richard missed the top move, and Magnus just played knight to d2 with check, which is very interesting, as Richard said after the game, that pretty much every move except the one that Magnus played here is okay. However, the move that Magnus played loses the game. Magnus played knight to d2. Feel free to pause the video and punish this great insolence by Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that there's stuff on the dark squares, and that Richard has a dark square bishop. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook captures on d2. This is what Richard played, and it was in this position on move 41 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. After rook captures on d2, bishop to e3 with check will win more material. King h7, bishop captures, you will be up a full piece, and of course completely winning. Very nicely done. It was Richard who was putting the pressure for the entire game. Doesn't matter that Magnus blundered here. It was Richard's incredible play that made Magnus burn so much time, and in the end he was playing an increment for so many moves, caused him to blunder, and very nice victory for Richard Rapport. And I find it very funny that Magnus, he's so much against playing classical chess here, but we've seen in the previous video against Young Oro where he blundered a knight in bullet. Here he blunders a knight in slow rapid. What's next? That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. First game we are covering from the Grenke Chess Classic. Very much looking forward to some other ones. But so far, every game except this one has ended in a draw. So we'll see what happens in round 2. And I'm very, very much looking forward to a clash between Magnus and world classical champion Ding Liren. Hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Juha Samuel Ovaskainen, David Gatten, Joyful Chess Lover, Yun Young, and Mr. Hoodie Guy for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Grenke Chess Classic until it finishes. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.